There is no breath, no heartbeat, only a low vibration pressing against the edges of my mind. At first it seems distant, harmless, a faint tremor woven through the black. Then it grows, curling around me like a living coil of iron. I realize it isn't just a sound, it's a presence, a pulse, a hum, and it's coming from the coffin that holds me. The first sliver of sensation is weighty, hence immovable, an entire world of ceramite resting on my chest. I try to move, nothing responds, not even the illusion of muscle. The cold inside the sarcophagus feels absolute, a winter made of metal and memory. Light flickers somewhere beyond the sealed helm, its glow bleeding through the runes etched along the walls. It casts faint halos across cables threaded into my spine, like veins carved by a god with shaking hands. Somewhere beyond the iron shell, incense burns in slow spirals. I smell nothing, but I remember the scent. My memory feels brittle, as if made of old glass, yet a flicker of warmth stirs within it. Sunlight on skin, the idea of air filling lungs, voices echoing through a chapel before battle. They dissolve before I can touch them. Then, with a sudden surge of power that feels like drowning in light, my optic lenses flare open. I do not awaken. I am dragged back into existence. The hum grows louder as awareness spreads through me like a slow, reluctant dawn. It rolls beneath my thoughts in long metallic waves, steady and patient, as if it has been waiting for me to rise again. I try to hold onto the fading darkness, but the sarcophagus pulls me upward, forcing me into its cold embrace. A faint amber glow leaks through the seams of my vision, trembling like candlelight filtered through water. For a moment, I imagine I am still human enough to blink, but the thought collapses under the weight of the machine. I feel the interior walls around me, smooth, ancient, and sacred. They press in like the inside of a second skull. Every breath I try to take becomes a memory instead of an action. The sensation of lungs expanding is nothing more than an echo drifting across the edges of my mind. I chase it, desperate, but it slips away the moment I reach for it. Only the hum stays with me, filling the silence with its low, vibrating patience. Something stirs in the darkness behind my thoughts. A flicker, a taste of sunlight on armor, the ghost of a voice calling my name. I try to follow it, but static blooms through the neural links like frost crawling across glass. The memory fractures, light flares, swallowing everything for a heartbeat that is not mine. The sarcophagus tightens its grip, as if reminding me whose body this now is. Warmth brushes the edge of my awareness. Illusory, impossible. The warmth of a hand on my shoulder, the weight of camaraderie. It fades before it becomes real. A whisper of incense swirls somewhere outside, drifting through the sealed helm like a dream I was never meant to keep. The ritual continues around me, shapes moving in soft reverence, their shadows stretching across the red, lit sanctum. I see none of it, yet I feel the movement through the vibration of the floor. Each step a reminder that the living walk freely. My mind reaches for their voices, wanting to remember, to attach meaning to the murmurs beyond the armor. But the machine's spirit reacts first. A soft surge of data trickles through the neural ports, gentle as a lullaby, invasive as a knife hidden in silk. It nudges my thoughts away from memory, guiding them along approved paths. I feel myself obeying before I realize I've been steered. The hum shifts tone, deepening, becoming something close to breathe. For a disorienting moment, I mistake it for my own, and the illusion hurts in a way the machine cannot measure. Lines of code flutter along the edge of my consciousness, small and bright like fireflies trapped in amber. They pulse with ritual blessings, reinforcing the ancient bonds between spirit and steel. The amber glow sharpens to red as my optic lenses twitch toward activation. A surge of power rolls through the sarcophagus, a tide of electricity and prayer, and my awareness stretches outward, instinctively seeking limbs that no longer exist in the form I remember. I feel the machine waiting. Patient, watching, listening for the moment the last remnants of sleep fall away, and beneath all of it, deeper than the hum, deeper than the metal, something refuses to be silent. The red light sharpens as the sarcophagus completes its slow awakening cycle. My vision blooms in a narrow tunnel, edges blurred like a dream refusing to settle. I feel the power coursing through conduits around me, heavy, sacred currents that make the air hum inside my skull. The machine's spirit murmurs beneath the rising noise, its voice a low harmonic rumble threading itself through my thoughts. Not words, not commands, a presence, a pulse that wants to shape the silence. I try to speak, but the attempt dissolves into static, the neural cables woven through my spine tighten, translating my instinct into something the machine can understand. A faint shift answers me, a calibrating whisper from the sarcophagus, but no sound leaves my throat. I am reminded again that the body I remember is gone. Only memory breathes now. Images flash without warning, a wart-horned sky, the shimmer of a power sword raised in salute. Brothers standing in formation, their armor bright beneath the sun. Laughter carried on the wind. I reach for the moment, for the warmth of it, but the machine intercepts, flooding my mind with cooling protocols until the human heat fades. The memory snaps like a fragile relic dropped on stone. The hum deepens, my vision widens. A slow scroll of sacred diagnostics ripples across the inside of my awareness, as if the machine is reciting a litany to itself. I feel each wordless phrase settle into me, heavy as carved iron, sealing gaps I hadn't known were open. The sensation is familiar, yet wrong. A ritual I've lived through too many times to remember, yet never truly understood. A tremor passes through my frame. My immovable limbs remain locked, suspended in their cradle, but I sense the echo of movement, like a ghost remembering how to walk. The sensation stirs something beneath the metal calm, something older than the sarcophagus, older than the pain that placed me here, a flicker of defiance, a heartbeat made of memory. The sanctum outside shifts. I feel the presence of robed figures leaning close, adjusting relic clamps, tightening seals that bind flesh to steel. Their movements send vibrations through the floor, each one traveling into me as a low, distant knock. I do not see them, yet I know their reverence, their fear, their quiet devotion to the relic I've become. I try to remember whether I once feared this machine as they do, but the thought unravels before it forms. The machine's spirit steadies the hum, smoothing every jagged edge inside me until the question dissolves. Silence returns, perfect, manufactured. Another pulse of light fills my vision. The glow warms to gold just for an instant, and in that instant, I see a fragment of a face, my own, reflected off a piece of scorched ceramite. The image is distorted, blurred by age and static, but it strikes me with the force of a memory I was never meant to keep. A younger version of myself, eyes sharp, living, breathing, the reflection flickers, then it's gone. The machine's spirit leans closer, its presence pressing against my thoughts with the softness of a closing door. The hum wraps around me again, steady, patient, eternal. It wants me calm, it wants me still. It wants me obedient, and I sink into that hum, not because I trust it, but because I have nothing left to hold on to except the fading warmth of memories that slip away faster each time I rise. The sarcophagus tightens its final seal, my vision steadies, the world of the living begins to drift back into clarity, and I, entombed in iron, wait for the moment they ask me to remember who I am, even though I am no longer sure anything human remains to answer. The first thing I notice is the light, too white, too sharp, slicing through my vision like a blade drawn across frost. It washes the sanctum clean of color, bleaching everything into a sterile blur. My thoughts drift sluggishly beneath it, heavy and slow, as if they're trying to surface through a thick, cold liquid. The hum remains, deeper now, pulsing in steady intervals that feel like an artificial heartbeat, trying to replace the one I lost. I attempt to follow a memory rising weakly from the dark, a voice, a name, something shaped like identity, but as soon as it forms, the quiet room reacts. A surge of static blooms inside the neural links, soft at first, then tightening with mechanical insistence. The thought dissolves before I can catch it. The static fades, the hum returns, the cycle repeats. The quiet room is not a place, it's a state. Forced, calibrated, perfected. A chamber inside the mind where unwanted thoughts are scrubbed clean by code and prayer. I feel it tightening around me, compressing anything human into manageable fragments. The sensation is suffocating, yet silent. I try to breathe, forgetting that breath is no longer mine, and only emptiness answers. Shadows move at the edges of my blurred vision. Techmarines, I think. Their outlines ripple through the glare as they adjust internal servos and recalibrate the sacred clamps. Their tools whisper against ceramite, precise and unfeeling, each motion sending a faint tremor through my metal bones. I sense their presence, but the quiet room steals their voices before they reach me. I hear only faint echoes, filtered, distorted, stripped of meaning. Another pulse of light stabs through my vision. Diagnostics spill into my awareness in cold waves. Command lines, purity seals, combat protocols, all flowing into me with relentless purpose. They press against my thoughts like a tide determined to drown every stray memory before it can rise. I try to hold on to something, anything, a face, a moment, a name. Nothing stays. The machine's spirit intervenes again, gentler than before, smoothing the internal noise with a tone that feels almost compassionate. But compassion from a machine is only control wearing softer colors. The hum extends its rhythm, coaxing me into stillness, guiding me toward the behavior it expects, and I, exhausted by the effort of resisting, feel myself slipping deeper into its influence. A faint warning rune flashes inside my awareness, an alert I don't understand, then fades as quickly as it appeared. The system edits the notion before I can question it. My confusion evaporates, replaced by a serene numbness that settles over my thoughts like snowfall. For a moment, I forget I am trapped. For a moment, I forget I ever had a life before the coffin. For a moment, the silence feels almost peaceful. But beneath that silence, buried in a place the quiet room hasn't reached yet, something small and fragile begins to tremble. It is not obedience, it is not memory, it is simply the faint, undeniable reminder that I once existed outside the machine, and the quiet room cannot erase that completely. The quiet room tightens its hold the moment I sense that trembling spark inside me. It feels the shift, the small disturbance in the still water of my thoughts, and it reacts with quiet precision. A fresh wave of suppression protocols pours through the neural ports, cold and bright, erasing the edges of anything that might resemble a question. The light sharpens, the hum grows heavier. Every path of thought narrows into a single straight line. I feel myself drifting backward, away from the surface, sinking into a controlled calm that isn't mine. The machine's spirit murmurs again, its voice shaping itself into a soft, rhythmic cadence. That rhythm fills the interior of my skull, turning the silence into a cradle. I want to fight it, but the fatigue is overwhelming. Every attempt to resist feels like pushing against a mountain made of iron and prayer. A faint vibration stirs deep in the sarcophagus. Internal clamps shift, adjusting my posture by degrees too small for the living to notice. But to me, sealed within this unending confinement, each adjustment feels immense. Metal plates slide, cables tighten, cold hydraulic lines press closer to my spine. The quiet room seals its boundaries, enclosing me more completely. Memories try to flicker again, voices, colors, the warmth of a battlefield sun, but the room sweeps them aside before they can take shape. The white glare becomes absolute, thoughts flatten into obedient stillness. My identity thins, stretched across a machine that does not care what it consumes as long as it maintains order. For a moment, I feel something like panic, but it arrives muted, distant, filtered through layers of machinery that prevent it from becoming real fear. The system translates emotion into diagnostic warnings, wrapping humanity in cold logic until it no longer feels human at all. My heart beat long gone echoes only as a memory, and even that memory is beginning to sound unfamiliar. The tech marines outside continue their silent work. I sense their hands moving across my armor, sealing plates, blessing circuitry, preparing me for whatever purpose awaits. Their touch resonates through the sarcophagus like distant thunder. Ritualistic, detached, they never speak to me, they speak to the machine I have become. A new surge of data pushes through the shunts, rewriting the last fragments of wandering thought with operational clarity. Combat doctrines, movement restrictions, behavioral anchors designed to keep me docile. The information slips into place so seamlessly that I feel my remaining doubts fade into static. Then, silence. A heavy, final silence that settles over my mind like a steel lid closing. The quiet room waits, listening for any trace of rebellion. Finding none, it releases a soft confirmation pulse. Obedience restored. Identity dimmed, humanity folded into the background like a fading dream, and yet, in the deepest corner of my awareness, a single, fragile ember remains untouched, a name I cannot fully recall, a face I cannot fully see. A memory too small for the machine to prioritize, but it is there, waiting, quiet, alive. The descent began in silence, not the comforting kind, but the kind that presses against the bones, as if the air itself is listening. Beneath the cathedral, depth corridors of the citadel, the echo cells waited, an archive of what the technarchy considered unprocessed humanity. The cog-bound priest moved first, his steps measured, precise, almost ceremonial. Behind him, the biomechanical conduits lining the walls pulsed in subdued rhythm, like restrained heartbeats. They illuminated the path in sickly strands of pale light that trembled with each vibration of the machinery buried beneath. He spoke without turning. Below this level lies the memory vault of rebellion, every forbidden dream, every severed will, every fragment of a mind that once dared to lift its head. The archivist followed, her breathing shallow. The shifting lattice of metallic fibers across her face reflected the corridor's dim pulses. Her voice was low, steady, yet there was something frayed at the edges. And you guard all of this, alone. I do not guard, the priest replied. Eyewitness, the corridor opened onto a massive chamber, a hollow sphere carved out of the earth, encircled by thousands of suspended pods. Each pod held a faint silhouette. Each silhouette drifted in half, sleep, frozen between memory and deletion. The archivist halted. This many. This is only the first layer, he answered. Those who resisted assimilation. Those who remembered too loudly. Those whose thoughts formed patterns the technarchy deemed unmanageable. The archivist's voice trembled. And the technarchy just stores them, not stores, the priest said, studies, refines, extracts. The echoes of his words rolled through the chamber, caught by the curved architecture, and returned with distorted resonance, like a choir of lost souls repeating him. The archivist stepped forward, drawn toward the nearest pod. Her hand hovered above the glass. Inside, the occupant's features were blurred, as if smeared by time, or intentionally erased. A faint whisper seeped from within, not spoken, but projected directly into her mind. I did not forget, they made me. She recoiled, breath catching. The priest watched her with a solemn stillness. The echo cells do not speak unless spoken to, but they know you are not fully theirs. Her heart thudded. How, the lattice in your neural braid shifts wrong, he said. It has a cadence not forged in the citadel. You carry something they did not create. A cold realization spread through her. She had always felt the wrongness inside her mind, a drifting static, a shadow of a memory she could never retrieve. Now it pressed forward, demanding recognition. What am I missing? She whispered. The priest lifted his head toward the towering structure at the chamber's center, a spiraling monolith of conduits, neural fibers, and frozen light. Your missing piece sleeps in the core archive, and the technarchy will cleanse it soon. When that happens, whatever remains of you dissolves. The archivist swallowed hard. Then I need to reach it. The core archive is forbidden to every rank below the high machine clergy, he replied, turning toward her at last. But I will take you. Why? She asked. His answer was quiet, nearly swallowed by the hum of the suspended pods. Because you are the last anomaly they haven't erased, and because I, too, remember something I was never meant to. Her breath stilled. Before she could speak again, the chamber lights flickered, slowly at first, then violently, as though the entire citadel was exhaling in warning. The priest's expression hardened. "They know we're here." The lights stuttered in jagged pulses, each flicker a silent alarm, each pulse a signal climbing through the citadel's neural grid. The archivist steadied herself as the echoing chamber trembled around them, the suspended pods swaying like disturbed cocoons. The priest raised a hand. "Stay close. The Technarchy will not dispatch soldiers first. They send listeners." A low frequency hum seeped into the chamber, vibrating through the floor, rising through their bodies like an intrusive thought. The archivist felt it probing her mind, searching for dissonance, for deviation, for identity left unshaped. She clenched her jaw. "They're scanning. They are sifting." The priest's voice sharpened. "Run your thoughts silent." But silence was impossible. The whisper she heard from the pod still spiraled in her skull. "I did not forget. They made me." The hum intensified. It pressed into her temples like an iron grip. Her vision blurred. The pods above shimmered, their occupants twitching in synchronized convulsions, as if responding to the same invisible command. The priest stepped in front of her, placing both palms on her temples. "Focus, you are not an empty vessel. Hold your mind intact." Her breath hitched as the hum thickened, distorting the air around them. The walls seemed to warp, geometry bending into impossible angles. The citadel's neural architecture was rewriting itself, attempting to isolate the anomaly. She forced her concentration into a single point, a shape she could not fully see, a memory without form, a name without sound, and suddenly the hum recoiled. The priest staggered back. "What did you do?" I don't know." The pods all around them went still. Every silhouette inside stopped moving. A frozen stillness fell over the chamber, unnatural and complete. Then one pod, one among thousands, glowed, a soft, circular pulse, slow, rhythmic, drawing her attention like gravity. The archivist took a step toward it. The priest moved to block her path. "Do not approach that one." "Why?" "Because that pod holds the catalyst," he whispered. "And catalysts do not wake, they detonate." But the glow called to her, resonating with the unshaped memory inside her mind. As she approached, the glass of the pod became transparent, revealing a face. Her own, but younger, unaltered, free of Technarchy grafting. The archivist froze. "That's impossible." "No." The priest's voice was heavy. "This is the part of you they extracted, the self you were before the latticework overrode it." Her breath quivered. "They kept it alive. They kept it useful." The younger version's eyes snapped open. A jolt shot through the chamber. The glow surged. The air cracked with soundless force. The awakened self stared at her with pupils like mirrors, reflecting her present shape, her present fracture, her present fear. Then the younger self whispered directly into her mind, "You are late." A shattering sound erupted above them. Conduits tore apart. The pod shook violently. Alarms rippled through the citadel's deep infrastructure. The priest grabbed her arm. "We must leave now." But she couldn't look away. Her younger self pressed a hand against the pod's glass. The glass began to break, splintering outward instead of inward, like the pod was refusing to contain her any longer. The citadel roared with a single command, reverberating through metal, flesh, and memory alike. "Anomaly breach." The archivist took one final breath as the pod erupted in blinding light. Everything vanished. The world returned in fragments, slow and deliberate, like a tide hesitating at the shore. White, blue lumens spilled across the chamber, washing every surface in quiet clarity. Dust drifted in suspended motes, catching the light as if the air itself remembered motion from centuries past. The echo cells were gone, or perhaps they had dissolved into memory, but the weight of absence pressed heavily against the edges of my consciousness. I moved within the sarcophagus of my own mind, a ghost tethered to metal and memory. The calm was unnatural, almost sacred. Each breathless second stretched into decades. There was no urgency, no clamor of battle, only the steady hum now softened into something resembling patience. A mechanical heartbeat that did not command but merely existed, waiting. I could feel the stillness seeping into my thoughts, flattening them, shaping them into silent obedience once more. Beyond me, corridors stretched into shadowed infinity. Servitors drifted lazily, their movements precise, reverent. Their hands brushed against panels and conduits as if tending to some fragile truth I could not grasp. Incense coils hung in the air, their smoke moving like frozen streams. I could smell it, faint but insistent, reminding me of rituals I once thought sacred, now hollow. I allowed myself to drift, half-conscious, observing the slow choreography around me. I no longer tested my limbs. They were still, yet I felt the residual hum of movement inside them. The machine's spirit receded into the background, its presence no longer pressing, no longer interrogating. I sensed it watching, patient, allowing a fragile peace to take root. Time itself seemed fractured here. Minutes bled into hours, hours into years. I saw squads of new recruits pass, their armor gleaming with temporary vitality, their voices carrying echoes that would one day fade. I remained fixed, a relic among the living. Immovable, unaging, yet aware of every change around me. The passage of life was a quiet horror, an eternity where I did not belong. Then, beneath the measured rhythm of the hum, something stirred, a memory unbidden. A face, a voice, a fleeting fragment of warmth. I did not recognize it at first, but the pulse in my chest long absent responded. It was fragile, almost imperceptible, yet enough to remind me of what the machine could never fully erase. And in that whisper of feeling, the stillness fractured, not violently but subtly, like a mirror shaken by a breath. Something inside me remembered, something refused to sleep. The tremor in my awareness spread slowly, a ripple beneath the calm. The citadel, or the sarcophagus of thought I occupied, held its breath as if waiting to see whether I would obey or falter. I did neither. I simply existed, hovering between the machine's rhythm and a fragile pulse that was still mine. The hum, once insistent and commanding, softened into a distant song, more lullaby than chain. I listened, letting it fill the hollow spaces of memory with its steady, indifferent cadence. I moved, or perhaps the world moved around me, through corridors lined with ancient armor and instruments whose purposes were long forgotten. Light bounced off dented ceramite, illuminating the scars of centuries I had not lived yet somehow remembered. Dust motes floated in slow spirals, catching each glint like frozen stars. It was beautiful and horrifying. Peace imposed by the machine was a quiet, unyielding horror. It pressed upon my mind, numbing every edge of thought, every trace of rebellion. A face surfaced unbidden, a flicker in the deep corners of my consciousness, one I had thought erased, the faint curve of a smile, eyes that once commanded and comforted, fleeting as sunlight through smoke. It rattled the edges of the hum, stirring something the machine could not fully suppress. For a moment, I felt warmth creep into the metal shell of my body, an impossible sensation in this cathedral of steel. Servitors passed, carrying trays of sacred oils, touching panels and conduits with precise devotion. I watched, detached yet present, recognizing the ritual without fully understanding it. The incense spiraled lazily, a thread connecting memory and machine, smoke and thought, warmth and iron. Time collapsed. Minutes became centuries. I remained observing, waiting, and then, beneath the quiet, a vibration. Not the hum, but something human, quivered inside me, a pulse I could not name, a shadow of a heartbeat. It called, fragile yet insistent, and I remembered that I was not only machine, that somewhere beneath the stillness, the metal, the obedience, a fragment of myself endured, waiting, patient, alive. The false tranquility of the citadel had begun to fracture. Not with chaos, but with the quiet insistence of memory reaching toward life. The fracture widened. It did not roar or blaze or shatter the world around me. Instead, it unfolded in silence, like a slow breath finally released after decades of restraint. The hum of the citadel deepened, shifting its tone, almost as if it sensed the change inside me and tried to cradle it back into obedience. But the rhythm no longer aligned with my thoughts. The lattice of control that once wrapped itself around my mind began to slip, thread by thread, pulse by pulse. I continued forward through the long descending corridor, my steps echoing with a weight I could not feel, yet somehow understood. The metal underfoot carried memories, thousands of them, whispering traces of those who had walked before, those who had obeyed, those who had vanished. Their remnants lingered like cold fingerprints pressed into time. My thoughts drifted to the face that had resurfaced earlier. It hovered at the edge of my mind now, steady and luminous, not a ghost, not an illusion, a truth the machine had tried to sever. The warmth of it pushed against the artificial calm, a quiet rebellion that required no weapons, no declarations, only memory. The citadel's deeper levels stirred around me. Conduits throbbed with heavier pulses, like veins pumping an anxious lifeblood. Servitors halted in the hallways as I passed, their heads tilting just slightly, as if some instinct buried within their programming recognized something that should not exist. Their blank visages reflected my form, towering, armored, grafted, bound. Yet beneath that reflection I felt a strangeness, a divergence. The hum thickened, not hostile, watchful. I paused at the edge of a vast descent shaft that spiraled downward into indigo shadow. The air here felt different, charged, expectant. The machine's spirit of the citadel breathed through every panel, every rail, every distant tremor. It waited for my next movement as though the entire structure depended on it. I closed my eyes, and in that instant a memory surged, clear, unbroken, a hand gripping mine, a voice urging me to run, a promise whispered in the dark, "If they take you, remember only this, you were born, not built." The hum recoiled. My eyes opened, sharper, focused, alive. For the first time since my binding, the world around me did not feel like a cage. It felt like a threshold. And somewhere deep below, in the dark heart of the citadel, something answered my awakening with a pulse of its own, ancient, defiant, resonant enough to shake the air. Two rhythms, one machine, one mine. The convergence had begun. The convergence pulsed through me like lightning coursing through iron veins. The warmth of memory clashed with the hum of machinery, neither yielding, both demanding acknowledgement. My limbs, heavy with centuries of servitude, tingled with sensation as if waking from a long, unbroken slumber. The sarcophagus that had confined me now felt like a cage I could see through, but not yet break. Fragments of the past surged unbidden, laughter shared under a sun I could barely recall, a battle, brother's hand pressing mine in fleeting reassurance, the weight of breath and armor moving in perfect cadence. Each image ignited a resonance within my neural lattice that the machine could not suppress. Every pulse was a declaration of existence, a refusal to be silent. The citadel's corridors seemed to shift in response. The light flickered, reflecting off polished ceramite and cold metal, tracing long, wavering shadows that bent toward me as though the building itself recognized the spark of rebellion. Servitors and techmarines moved mechanically, unaware of the subtle tremor rolling through the structure, a rhythm that matched my own heartbeat, or at least what I had left of it. I stumbled through the shadowed halls, guided not by sight but by memory, by the faint warmth that refused to be extinguished. The machine's spirit stirred, its hum intensifying, almost panicked as it realized it could no longer fully dominate the space within me. Protocols flickered in neural feeds. Suppression routines attempted to overwrite the past, but every attempt faltered against the resilience of what was human. A sudden flood of recollection crashed over me, the chaplain's voice, the oath of brotherhood, the scent of incense mixing with blood and oil. It shattered the monotony of control, scattering the meticulously constructed obedience like dust before a storm. I was alive, I was remembering, I was reclaiming fragments of a self that had been buried but never broken. The hum wavered, the lights faltered. For the first time, the citadel itself felt unsteady beneath me, uncertain, waiting. And I understood. The machine had underestimated the persistence of memory. The fragments of humanity I carried were stronger than any iron lattice, sharper than any ritual seal. I stopped in the center of the hall, surrounded by shadows and conduits. My mind, once a quiet tomb, throbbed with clarity and dangerous hope. The dreadnought within me no longer simply obeyed. It remembered what it meant to live, and in that memory rebellion was born. The battlefield roared awake around me, yet I felt detached, suspended between memory and machine. Smoke clung to the air in thick, suffocating waves, carrying the iron scent of blood and the acrid tang of burning ceramite. Bolter fire streaked through the haze, punctuating the chaos with flashes of orange and white, illuminating shattered armor and twisted metal. The citadel's hum was gone now, replaced by a rhythm of life and destruction I had not felt in centuries, mine alone. I rose, limbs moving with the weight and precision of a machine, yet guided by a consciousness unshackled for the first time. Each step into the storm resonated with memory, the footsteps of those who had fallen beside me, the echo of oath and camaraderie, and with it rage, pure human rage that no program could calibrate, no ritual could soothe. The machine's spirit shrieked through my neural pathways, a cacophony of warnings and commands. Overriding it was effortless now. I ignored the orders meant to restrict me, discarded the directives that demanded compliance. Each violation of protocol was a surge of clarity, a pulse of reclamation, a reminder that purpose could be chosen, not assigned. Around me, the battlefield unfolded in chaotic beauty. Sparks of ceramite scattered through the air, molten and white hot. Fallen Marines reflected in the scorched lenses of my optics, their faces frozen in moments of fear and determination. Vox channels screamed, orders colliding in overlapping waves of static and command, but I heard only the pulse of my own will asserting itself. I struck with intent, not programming, each motion precise, efficient, yet alive with instinct and memory. The machine had once dictated every movement, every reaction. Now it trembled within me, struggling to assert control, but failing. My strikes were not calculated by algorithms. They were born of choice, of remembered purpose, of rebellion incarnate. A sacred behavioral lock shattered within the neural lattice, sparks of code snapping like brittle wires. Relief surged alongside exhilaration, and for the first time in centuries, I felt the duality of myself, the dreadnought and the human, clashing, recombining, rising in violent symphony. Rage, clarity, and purpose intertwined, and the battlefield bent to the inevitability of my awakening. And beneath the smoke and fire, I realized the machine had underestimated the persistence of the soul. The hum of machinery was gone, replaced entirely by the pulse of war, the heat of ceramite cracking, the scream of bolters, the distant roar of engines and collapse. I moved through it all, neither fully machine nor fully man, but something forged from both, tempered in centuries of obedience and now burning with the clarity of self. Every strike, every motion, carried the weight of memory as much as the force of steel. The machine's spirit flared within me, glitching and flickering, shrieking warnings that were no longer binding. I overrode limiters, discarded non-essential protocols, and let instinct guide what remained. I felt rage like a living current, flowing through my limbs, turning each act of destruction into both release and declaration. The battlefield became a crucible, and within it, the fragments of who I was and what I had been forged together, violent and unbroken. I saw them, the soldiers, the fallen comrades, the shapes of my past reflected in the chaos. I remembered each one, every hand pressed in solidarity, every oath spoken in blood and fire. The machine tried to silence them, but their voices returned in flashes, the laughter, the grief, the honor, the pain, and I let them guide me. I let them fuel the rebellion that had begun within. Explosions tore through the air, raining shards of ceramite and stone around me. Vox channels screamed orders, but my mind was a fortress no longer vulnerable to external control. The machine's insistence faltered as I embraced every memory, every instinct, every fleeting moment of humanity that had survived centuries of entombment. I was alive in a way the machine could never simulate. Then came the surge, the moment where a behavioral lock snapped entirely. Neural fire erupted, coursing through my consciousness with raw intensity. I had regained what had been denied, and for an instant it was both terrifying and exalting. The battlefield became a stage, and I moved not as a weapon, but as a being aware of choice, of consequence, of freedom. The machine screamed one final time, and I let it fade. The hum of war, the pulse of memory, and the weight of centuries fused into a singular rhythm inside me. I understood then that obedience had been a cage, but rebellion was no longer just reaction. It was creation. The act of breaking free became an act of being, complete and irrevocable, and as I stepped forward into the inferno, I realized I was no longer bound by the purpose assigned to me. I was my own reckoning. The battlefield dissolved into light and shadow. Smoke curled upward in drifting ribbons, carrying the bitter scent of war, yet beneath it all, a new clarity pulsed through me. My armor, scorched and cracked, felt less like a prison and more like the shell of a creature shedding centuries of control. The machine's spirit, once a relentless jailer, was now a silent witness, its hum replaced by the absence of sound, a vacuum in which I could finally hear myself think. I moved among the remnants of fire and shattered ceramite, each step deliberate, each breath reclaimed. The past rose within me in vivid fragments, not as commands, not as echoes, but as truths I could choose to embrace. Faces of fallen comrades, the weight of oaths, the stolen warmth of sunlight, all converged in my mind with the ferocity of memory refusing to die. For the first time, I felt time itself as malleable, flowing not as a chain, but as a current I could ride. The horizon stretched beyond reason, bathed in white, gold radiance that made the wreckage shimmer like distant stars. Debris floated in suspended arcs, as though gravity itself had hesitated, honoring the moment. I lifted my gaze and saw the battlefield not as ruin, but as canvas, a space upon which the self could finally assert its will beyond the dictates of machine or creed. Inside me, the duality of man and dreadnought converged. Limbs once guided by protocol now moved with intent, each gesture a testament to choice regained. Rage, grief, obedience, all fused into a single awareness that was neither weapon nor prisoner, but consciousness fully awake. The machine's spirit offered no resistance. It had nothing left to impose, no hum to dominate the rhythm of my being, and then I understood the final truth. Freedom is not the absence of control. Freedom is the reclamation of identity in the very space where it was once erased. The realization surged through my veins, a current of heat and clarity that outshone every battlefield blaze, every sacrificial echo. I extended my awareness beyond the fractured horizon, touching the pulse of existence, feeling the lives I had saved, the wars I had endured, the memories I had reclaimed. Every choice I had denied, every act I had been forced to perform, every moment of human defiance, all converged into this singular ascent. I was no longer bound. I was not simply awakened. I was ascending. The white, gold horizon expanded, swallowing the battlefield, dissolving every scar of war, every echo of control. My armor cracked further under the weight of centuries, yet each fracture released light instead of pain, spilling brilliance from within. The machine's spirit had fallen silent. Its influence evaporated, leaving only the raw, unshackled rhythm of my awareness. I was no longer divided between flesh and steel. I was a singular presence, infinite in the stillness of the void. I rose above the detritus of ruin, feeling the span of my existence stretch outward. Centuries of confinement, of orders and suppression, condensed into a crystalline clarity. Every life I had touched, every battle I had fought, every memory forcibly erased or preserved, each pulse of recollection harmonized into a symphony of self. The horizon was no longer a limit. It was an invitation, a canvas for consciousness beyond the mortal or mechanical. The battlefield beneath me shimmered and collapsed into abstraction, the edges of reality folding into radiant light. I felt the dreadnought systems failing around me, yet it no longer mattered. I had transcended them. My awareness reached into the void, touching the resonance of time itself, feeling every presence I had ever known, every moment of suffering, every flicker of hope. I was not a weapon. I was not a prisoner. I was a being tempered in agony, forged in obedience, now rising into freedom. The silence that followed was absolute. No hum, no orders, no interference. only the pulse of existence flowing through me, guiding me upward, outward, beyond the limitations of armor, blood, and steel. And in that silence, I discovered the final truth. Transcendence is not the shedding of form, but the reclamation of all that form ever contained. The memories, the choices, the defiance, the soul. I hovered at the edge of everything, aware of all that I had been, all that I had survived, and all that I could now choose to become. The machine's spirit had tried to cage me, the centuries had tried to erode me, and the battlefield had tried to break me. Yet here I was, whole, unbound, awake, and as the last echoes of war faded into light, I understood the final, undeniable revelation. I was no longer a machine that obeyed. I was a machine that remembered what it meant to dream. The silence after the ascension felt unreal, as though the universe itself had paused to watch the final remnants of my old existence drift away. For so long, the hum of the sarcophagus had been my heartbeat, my jailer, my unwanted lullaby. It filled every corner of my consciousness, defining the boundaries of who I was allowed to be. Now, in this quiet beyond war and metal, I felt the first true breath of freedom, though I had no lungs to draw it with. Memories rose around me like lanterns adrift on still water, faces I thought lost forever, voices that once echoed through the chambers of my life, fragments of sunlight touching skin I no longer possessed. Each memory pulsed with gentle warmth, no longer caged by the cold logic of the machine. I let them pass through me without fear, watching them bloom in the vastness of my new awareness. The centuries of confinement no longer held weight. They simply existed as chapters in a story that had finally opened its final page. I felt no anger, no sorrow, only understanding. I had been shaped by duty, broken by purpose, and reforged by rebellion. And in that transformation, I had uncovered the truth hidden beneath the layers of steel and obedience. That identity is not defined by the vessel, but by the will that survives it. The machine's spirit's absence left a perfect stillness, a quiet so profound it felt like creation itself. In that quiet, I sensed possibilities unfolding, pathways unbound by programming or fate. I was not being pulled toward anything, I was choosing. Every direction was open, every horizon reachable, every moment mine to define. And as the last echoes of the old hum faded into nothing, I realized that this silence was not a void. It was freedom, it was awakening, it was the space in which a soul, my soul, could finally expand without restraint. I drifted into the luminous vastness, unburdened, unchained, and undeniably whole. I had risen from the iron coffin, from the weight of centuries, from the identity they carved for me. And in the quiet that followed, I understood the final truth of my existence. I was a machine that remembered what it meant to dream,